Welcome to Think Like the MCAT, a brand new CARS passage series that is the most AAMC representative yet. We're not exaggerating about that either. In our focus group testing, 100% of people agreed. We're incredibly excited about this resource. These passages are first and foremost meant to give you insight into the logic, reasoning, and wordings specific to AAMC style CARS. Think of this as training for the real thing. We want you to be able to reason through a tough passage or question and answer set in the exact way one of the top CARS testers in the country would. The text explanations here are designed to be sufficient on their own, but for those who want a little more or want to hear about some cool tips and tricks, make sure you watch the videos as well. I tend to speak pretty slowly, so don't be afraid to watch the videos on a faster speed. I'd recommend 1.25 or 1.5x. In med school, you'll definitely be speeding up all your videos. You should thoroughly review each question and answer to maximize your understanding of CARS reasoning. That being said, if you can quickly verify that you in fact fully understood everything, there's no need to waste your time. Each video is timestamped so you can watch as much or as little as you need. Finally, because the passages here may overlap with the AAMC's adaptation of the source text, make sure you do those first. We'll be releasing more passages in the future, and we welcome any feedback or requests. But that's enough from me. It's time to think like the MCAT. On to question 3. Suppose that, during the Enlightenment period, only women wore trousers in North America. What does this information tell us? Well, the question doesn't give us much direction, so we're going to need to go to our answer choices and see how they're structured. From there, we can go back to the relevant part of the passage and see how everything fits together. Okay, so answer choice A says, supports the argument of Montesquieu's imaginary travel story. So would we think that if only women wore trousers in North America, would that support what Montesquieu was trying to say? Let's go back. Montesquieu says that in Europe, men wore trousers, but in Persia, women wore trousers. So if women wore trousers in North America, would that support Montesquieu's idea? No, that doesn't really make sense. The point that Montesquieu is trying to make was that there are certain aspects of society which we take for granted that are actually of a rather arbitrary nature. There's no real particular reason why men or women should be the only ones to wear trousers. So next we have B, that this information would neither support nor challenge the argument of Montesquieu's travel story. And now this one is exactly what we're looking for. The whole point of this example was that it doesn't matter who wears the trousers, but was pointing out the idea that we just accept some things without thinking about the reason for why they are the way that they are. So whether it was women or men wearing trousers in North America doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect the point Montesquieu is trying to make. This is going to be our answer. Now because of this, we know that it doesn't challenge the argument either. But would it modify the argument like we see in choice D? No. The same point still applies even if there's a third group of people who also wear trousers. This new information doesn't change anything. Our answer is B. Question 4. According to the author, in which of the following times would satire be clearly expected? This one we're going to have to think about. What did the author say about when we can expect satire? Now, this one might be a little bit hard to figure out exactly where this is going to come from. So why don't we go back to where the author introduces satire? And that would be paragraph 2. Paragraph 2 says a lot about satire, including that it usually occurs in an age of crisis when there's no absolute uniformity but rather two sets of beliefs. Of the two sets of beliefs, one has to hold sufficient power to suppress open attacks on the established order, but not veiled or secretive attacks on the established order. And we need to have civilized opponents, and we need to have an appeal to and respect for reason. So the overarching themes seem to be largely that people need to be reasonable, and it's usually in an age of crisis. So that sounds like the criteria for when satire would be clearly expected. Option 1 says, a period of great philosophical reflection. This sounds like an excellent fit for the idea of an age of reason for the civilized opponents. But we don't have the idea of a crisis, or this established order and suppression of attacks. Option 1 is lacking a crisis, and so probably isn't going to be a great fit. We can probably get rid of A. What do we think about option 2? A state of transition of monarchical power. That one sounds like it could be an age of crisis, but that's not necessarily the case. It could very well be a peaceful transition of power between the monarchs. Furthermore, this answer choice lacks the idea of an age of reason. So this one really also won't be a great fit. That leaves us only with 3. And this one says, an age of war among civilized nations. Does that fit our ideas of both crisis and reason? Thankfully, it does. An age of war certainly sounds like an age of crisis, and the idea of this war among civilized nations fits the idea of civilized opponents and people who would have a respect for reason. So of these 3 choices, the only one that really fits well with what that whole paragraph has discussed is going to be option 3. And that leaves us with C as our best answer. Okay, we're already over halfway done with our first passage together. Hopefully you're having fun and learning to think like the MCAT. Question 5 says, the author implies Montesquieu employed the mocking of light-hearted topics before approaching more significant ideas in order to. So why did Montesquieu talk about more light-hearted topics before getting to more significant ideas? Let's think about where this was mentioned. This comes from the end of the 4th paragraph as well as the beginning of the final paragraph. Montesquieu continues to progressively challenge the accepted things of the time. Only then can he expose the more consequential practices of society, such as religion. And we see the reason for this is that if Montesquieu had just started with the most consequential practices of society, readers would have been unsympathetic and they would have closed the book. So Montesquieu had to build up to these really significant ideas. So does that fit with the idea that Montesquieu needed to reveal the most pertinent information as a surprise ending? Well, it does seem like Montesquieu might be holding on to the most pertinent information towards the end. There's absolutely no indication that it needs to be a surprise. So based on that word alone, A is out. Next we have that Montesquieu did this in order to allow readers to develop better comfort with their beliefs being tested. This one sounds perfect. The idea of progressively challenging more and more consequential topics is exactly what Montesquieu is doing here. Montesquieu is allowing people to become comfortable with the idea of what they know and accept being tested. Answer B is a great fit. Even though it's not exactly what the passage said word for word, it's a rephrasing of the same concept. So this is perfect. Choice C alleges that Montesquieu employed this idea in order to prevent the audience from being confused. This is just simply not supported. There's no reason to suspect that the audience was confused or vulnerable to becoming confused at all. In fact, as we saw before, these were rather sophisticated members of the French society, so we wouldn't expect them to become confused. C can be eliminated. Next we have to keep with the literary structure popularized by Voltaire. Now, thinking back to the very first paragraph, we know that the method of satire is described as belonging to Voltaire. But the idea of the imaginary travel story is something that appears to belong to Montesquieu. There's really no explicit support which tells us that Montesquieu was following in Voltaire's footsteps or copying his structure. So D also lacks support, and we can eliminate this one too. And that leaves us with choice B as our best answer, as a good fit for why Montesquieu moved from lighthearted topics to more consequential ones. Question 6. According to the passage, which of the following portrayals would best constitute a present-day example of satire? And with that, we're going to need a definition of what is satire. Well, this was from the beginning of paragraph 2. Satire is a mode of challenging accepted notions by making them seem ridiculous. So let's see, which of these options challenges accepted notions by way of making them seem ridiculous? Answer choice A says, suggesting that people should brush their teeth with a hairbrush if they don't want cavities. Now, that certainly sounds ridiculous, but is it really challenging accepted notions? Answer choice A really isn't challenging what society currently does, which is brushing your teeth with a toothbrush. The idea of brushing it with a hairbrush doesn't make brushing it with a toothbrush seem ridiculous. In fact, it's the other way around. A gets it a little bit twisted around, and so we should eliminate it. Choice B says challenging the idea that cars should have 4 wheels when motorcycles only have 2. So here we have the idea of challenging an accepted notion. We even have the word challenging. That may have been tempting, but does it really paint cars as being ridiculous for having 4 wheels just because motorcycles only have 2? Not exactly. Answer choice B lacks the idea of making the accepted notion seem ridiculous as well. So this one can also be eliminated. Option C says asserting that dogs could fly airplanes if they went to flight school. Now, this is a pretty cute answer choice, but let's see if it fits. It certainly sounds ridiculous, but what accepted notion of society would this be challenging? That dogs can't fly airplanes? This one doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so it only fulfills the ridiculous part of our criteria. Finally, we have choice D, signifying over-reliance on devices by depicting faces glued to electronics. So let's look if we can find here our idea of challenging accepted notions as well as making them seem ridiculous. So if there is over-reliance on devices, does that sound like that could be an attempt of challenging something accepted by society? Sure. And would depicting faces glued to electronics make them seem ridiculous? It certainly seems ridiculous to me. The AAMC, more so than any other test writer, will have some of these goofball questions, and you really need to make sure that you can get inside the test writer's mind. See which of the answer choices best fits what the passage has told you. In CARS, everything has to be grounded in the passage. But sometimes, to get every single question right, we need to get inside the mind of the test writer. And with Think Like the MCAT, that's exactly what you can learn to do. Answer choice D is by far the best of our available 4 answer choices. So that's the one we're going to go with. While all CARS questions tend to be pretty fun, this one was even more fun than usual, wouldn't you agree? And now, question 7, our final question. Which of the following best fits the intended meaning of Descartes' quote about travel among varied peoples? Now, it's absolutely key that we look at the right quote here. We want what Descartes was trying to say. So if we travel over to paragraph 3 where we find these relevant quotes, we see that what Descartes said was that travel among varied peoples will unburden our minds of the notion that everything against our modes is ridiculous and against reason. So according to Descartes, if you travel around and experience diverse cultures and peoples, you will become more open-minded and realize that everyone who's different from you isn't ridiculous. It's important to note that the other quote, the idea that travel showed not that other people's customs but our own are ridiculous, that was not Descartes. That was Montesquieu and Voltaire who said that. So we have to be very careful on this question. So what do we think about travel will show you that others are not ridiculous? Is that what fits with what Descartes said? This one sounds good. It will unburden our minds of the idea that everything against what we do is ridiculous. So travel will show you that other people aren't ridiculous. A is a great answer. Next we have B. Travel will demonstrate that your own customs are ridiculous. This one is the opposite. This one lines up with what Montesquieu and Voltaire said. They were the ones who said that our own customs are ridiculous. So B should be eliminated. C says that travel will validate your assumptions of others. Now hopefully we can see that's exactly the opposite of what Descartes meant. So C is also out. Now D, travel will improve your reasoning skills. This one is potentially true. If you're unburdening your mind of this notion that everything against what you do is ridiculous, perhaps it could improve your reasoning skills. However, that's a much more indirect conclusion to make than answer choice A, which is a direct, exact interpretation of what Descartes said in paragraph 3. So A will absolutely have to be the better answer of those two. And there you have it. The final answer to the final question of our free trial passage for Think Like the MCAT. I want to thank you for allowing me to travel with you on your journey towards becoming a CARS expert. I'll see you in the next video.